Morning, this is a response to a video on You Doubled by It's Me. Hi there, Stuart. The video is called It's Bollocks, What's the Point? And it's in response to my Cogito Ergo God video about presuppositionalism. What you're saying there, Stuart, if I get you right, is that you know, quite understandably, presuppositionalism in a Christian or religious context is bollocks because it makes just far too much of an assumption. Whereas the cogito, which I tried to compare it to in that previous video of mine, the cogito just says, how it's usually translated, I think therefore I am. It seems to make good grounds for the existence of this thing called an I, whereas saying, I think therefore God exists, which I guess is a kind of version of presuppositionalism, doesn't make sense. But I agree with you, so I'm just playing devil's advocate here really, but I think one of the problems is that, and I was trying to bring this out in the last video, is that suppositionalists, religious, the ones I mentioned, Side 10 Bruggencate and his mates, I mean, they make all kinds of assumptions beyond the minimal one of God exists, you know what I mean, about what God might be. And you mentioned, a guy with a beard sitting in a throne in the sky. They don't quite make it that specific, but you can tell they've got very specific understandings of what this thing God might be. And the term itself, it comes with such baggage that you can't really do it, in any meaningful sense, I don't think. But then the term I comes with a lot of baggage as well, doesn't it? I mean, because it feels like I, when we say it, it's just this kind of axle at the middle of experience and the still centre of the turning world, the still point from which one's own perspective arises. You know what I mean? It feels like that, and it feels like it's, but just by saying I, you're not saying anything. But there's a lot in I as well. I think there's a lot of additional suppositions in I, just as there is in God. So, for example, I, the self, I think it has this feeling of ownership to it. If I say I, there's a kind of ownership of my experience. They're my experiences that I'm having. There's an ownership thing there, as opposed to you and your experiences. And that comes with the I, doesn't it? And a sense of location. I has a location in space and in time. I mean, I guess that's what it's partly constructed out of. But it's presupposed. When you say I, you don't just presuppose. You're not just identifying a kind of neutral point. It's not a simple assumption, is it? It's a complex assumption involving space and time and ownership and probably lots of other things as well. Language, probably. I don't know. Lots of other stuff, which are unspoken in the cogito. Which might not be a match for the guy with the beard in the sky and the big stone tablets. But they are still additional presuppositions, I think. And I think, some versions of the cogito that I've heard, there's a Radio 4 show, I don't know if you know Melvin Bragg's In Our Time. He did a programme on the cogito about a year ago, I think. And actually, I might try and make a video. I might just try and put it on You Doubled. Anyway. There was a panel discussion about the cogito. And at the end of that, one of the panellists was talking about how different kind of interpretations, like for example, instead of saying I think therefore I am, they were saying that some people would interpret it as just thinking therefore being, which I thought was quite interesting. Just thinking exists, and implicit within thinking, even kind of dismissing that sense of ownership and the sense of it's a person that's thinking, taking away those additional presuppositions. Just thinking presupposes being. Or thinking implies being. Thinking and being are completely bound up with one another. So what am I saying that for? Yeah, I guess just when you get to that point, when you just think thinking therefore being, I can feel myself thinking now, and I know it's me that's thinking. But if I was going to carry on the Cartesian doubt, I could say, well, hang on, yes, I can feel thinking going on. And I can also feel that sense of ownership that I call I, that myself. But I could be wrong in that. I could be a radio inside my head giving me that feeling of ownership, of that thinking. That could be I don't know, a kind of script of a video game playing out where that feeling of ownership is just produced in a character. It could be a malicious demon, which is the way Descartes calls it, a malicious demon projecting a sense of ownership onto that feeling of thinking. I can't deny that thinking exists, because that's the paper on which all this stuff is being written. But I can doubt that sense of ownership, the selfhood that seems to be part of that. And I think, personally, once you get to that, then that idea of cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, or this God thing, the presuppositionalist thing, then they're not too far apart. I mean, you'd have to do exactly the same thing with God, though. And God is probably a bad word to use at that point, just because it's got so much baggage, hasn't it? You know, you'd have to strip away all of those things to do with creation and benevolence and omniscience and all those kind of attributes that you give to God. And it would just be another name, a sound rig that you just make to indicate that thinking and being and existence and those kind of words are all tangled up in a single concept, really. It's not as useful a concept, I guess, in moral terms as something like a God, and probably not as useful as in personal terms as something like a self or an I, but I don't think they're that far apart. Anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense. I'll try and make a more coherent video later. It's quite early in the morning right now. The other thing you're talking about, purpose, I'll have to come back to that, I think, because that's kind of intersecting with Gary's video as well, isn't it? And there is some good stuff to talk about in there. Because purposelessness, I agree with you in many ways, actually. I do see purposelessness in the whole system, and I do see kind of wastefulness in the system. And of course, I see lots of damage, and I've experienced bits of damage myself, not too bad, but you can see it around, can't you? You can see this isn't something you would design if you had the choice. There's better ways of doing it, I think. It isn't the best of all possible worlds, as Pangloss says, I don't think. Or if it is, then that's rubbish. But yeah, like yourself, I do see moments of joy and pleasure, in my own life, and I guess the lives of most people I know, certainly enough to stop them from committing harikiri. Anyway, so there's something to be said there. I'm not quite sure what it is exactly, but I'll have to come back to that. Anyway, thanks very much for that. I'm glad you managed to upload. Sorry about the glitch in the friends system. If anybody else sees this, I'm sorry about that. I've put the upload system on to open again now, so that you don't have to have friends to be able to add videos. I will put that back in, but I need to fix that friend thing first, don't I? I'm doing some testing of it over the weekend, so I'll figure that out. Alright, Stuart. I don't know if you know this, Stuart, by the way. You've got a mirror behind you. This round mirror behind you? And whenever I see your video, the thumbnails of your videos, it looks like you've got horns, like this. Big horns sticking out of your head. You are devil incarnate, Stuart.